A siren cuts through the night, sharp enough to make the windows shake, and Marcus Vale freezes as the trading floor screens flash red like a spreading fire, warning him that something enormous is breaking. The phones tremble on their hooks, and a message blinks across the global feed, hinting that a deal no one saw coming has detonated inside the markets. He breathes in the metallic scent of panic, watching numbers collapse and rise in strange waves, as if the system is breathing on its own. He remembers the silence before storms, the way people pretend nothing is wrong until everything is already falling apart. Tonight, the stakes feel heavier, tied to power he once trusted. He senses a truth wrapped in shadows, a choice that will tear open the world he knows. And as the final line on the ticker freezes, he hears one question echo inside him like a warning. What if this deal is only the beginning? Marcus feels the weight of silence settle over the floor, the kind that turns fear into something sharper, something that forces people to whisper instead of speak. He knows the markets don't move like this unless someone powerful pushes them, and the idea of an unseen hand twisting the numbers makes him feel colder than the storm outside. Elena walks beside him, her calmness a thin mask hiding something she hasn't said yet, something he senses is tied to the message that froze the screens. He tries to steady his breath, telling himself that chaos always reveals opportunity. But even he hears the doubt in that thought. The air carries a strange electricity, as if the entire building knows a secret. And somewhere in that quiet, he feels the first hint that this deal could pull him into a world he isn't ready for. The elevator hums as it climbs, each floor passing like a countdown to something unavoidable. And Marcus watches Elena's reflection in the mirrored steel, wondering what she's hiding behind that steady expression. A city of lights spreads below them, buzzing with storms and secrets that seem to stretch into the night. He thinks about the deal again, the way the numbers didn't just shift, they convulsed. He's seen manipulation before, but this feels different. Too coordinated, too sudden. He senses that they're heading towards someone who already knows more than they do. As the elevator slows, a cold flush moves through him, the kind that comes before truth hits like a wave. He wonders if he's walking straight into a trap disguised as opportunity. The doors part with a hiss, revealing a conference room that feels too quiet for the hour, its long glass table catching faint lightning flashes as if holding a pulse of its own. Marcus steps inside cautiously, aware of every creak in the floor, while Elena scans the room as though expecting someone who isn't there yet. The documents on the table are arranged too neatly, almost staged, and he knows setups when he sees them. Something about the symmetry tells him this moment was planned long before they arrive. A whisper of wind from the open balcony makes the pages rustle like they're breathing. For the first time tonight, he wonders if he's already too deep to turn back. Marcus approaches the lone folder in the center of the table, its edges crisp as though untouched, and his pulse picks up when he sees the bold lettering of a firm he thought was dying, not rising. Elena watches him carefully, her silence louder than words, hinting that she's known about this longer than she's admitting. He runs a hand across the cover, feeling its weight, realizing it holds the blueprint of a deal large enough to shift the market's spine. The city thunder rolls behind the glass as he opens it, each page revealing risks layered like traps. He senses this isn't a rescue, but an engineered takeover. The kind that can crown an empire overnight, or demolish one. And as he lifts the final page, he feels fate closing around him like a door. Marcus wakes before dawn, the city still wrapped in a heavy gray that feels more like ash than fog. And for a moment, he lies still, listening to the distant rumble of traffic rising like a warning he can't ignore. The folder from last night sits on his desk, its sharp corners catching the faint light, as if urging him to move faster. He replays every detail in his head. The sudden blackout, the vanishing data, the name of a firm resurrected from near collapse. Something about it gnaws at him like a missing piece held just out of reach. Elena's silence bothered him. She knew something deeper, something tied to the roots of this deal. As he tightens his tie and watches the first streaks of daylight burn through the skyline, he realizes he's stepping into a game already in motion. One that doesn't slow down for anyone, especially those who discover the truth too late. Wait. The office lobby buzzes with a strange tension, the kind that spreads before anyone knows the source, and Marcus feels eyes following him as he steps across marble floors that shine too clean for a day like this. Elena waits near the elevators, posture straight, expression set like she has already made up her mind about something she once said. When she hands him a printed report, its weight feels heavier than paper, filled with names he hasn't heard in years and figures that bend logic. He senses she's guiding him toward a truth she's afraid to speak aloud, a truth that might expose why the markets convulse the way they did. As the elevator door slides shut, he realizes they're not climbing toward clarity. They're climbing toward confrontation. Inside the research floor, the energy is sharper, more frantic, as analysts whisper over graphs that shift like unstable ground. Tom Weller hurries toward them, breathless and pale, clutching a tablet he treats like evidence instead of data. He tells them the firm at the center of the deal has been quietly buying distressed assets for months. Assets that shouldn't be profitable unless someone knew the future before it happened. Marcus feels a chill ripple up his spine at the thought of prediction turning into power. He knows markets reward information, but what Tom describes sounds more like control. Elena steps closer, absorbing every word without surprise, confirming Marcus's suspicion that she has already mapped the edges of this conspiracy. He realizes their next move will drag them into deeper shadow. In the strategy room, they spread the data across a massive digital table, charts rising in holographic layers that reveal patterns no one should have been able to engineer. Marcus watches the pieces align, each point a quiet confession of a force manipulating the market with surgical precision. Elena taps a sequence that forms a single red line cutting through the graphs like a blade, showing exactly when the covert accumulation began. Tom mutters that this level of coordination requires someone with access far above any private firm. Marcus feels the room tighten. He understands they are no longer dealing with simple ambition, but something built on secrecy and leverage. The deeper they look, the more he senses the trap was set long before they noticed it. As the day bleeds into evening, the skyline burns orange behind the office windows, turning the strategy room into a silhouette of long shadows and unanswered questions. Marcus stands by the glass, replaying the numbers in his mind, trying to understand how one deal could ripple through global systems so quickly. Elena joins him, finally admitting the firm behind it has a silent partner, someone with enough influence to rewrite the rules without ever appearing on paper. Her voice carries a quiet fear he hasn't heard from her before. Tom approaches with a final report, confirming their worst guess. The takeover isn't coming. It has already begun. Marcus stares out at the darkening city, realizing they are watching the birth of a financial empire powerful enough to reshape everything. The morning news hits like a shock wave, blasting through the trading floor with headlines that turn whispers into full-blown panic. And Marcus feels the shift before anyone says a word. Markets across Asia have frozen, liquidity vanishing, as if sucked into a vacuum created by the takeover they only began to unravel yesterday. He watches analysts scramble, their voices cracking as they try to explain patterns that make no sense on the surface, but fit perfectly into the puzzle forming in his mind. Elena strides toward him with a grim certainty, her eyes sharper than the glow of the screens, and tells him regulators are requesting a private briefing, something that never happens unless trouble has climbed past the walls. Tom arrives seconds later, out of breath, holding a chart with a spike so unnatural it looks like a heartbeat flatlining in reverse. Marcus feels the truth settling in. Whatever force controls this deal is no longer hiding. It's claiming territory in broad daylight. The briefing room feels colder than the rest of the building. Its steel edges and dim lights giving the sense of a place where decisions have consequences that never reach daylight. Marcus sits across from the regulators, noticing how their faces tighten each time Elena speaks, as though she's confirming fears they hoped were only rumors. Tom pulls up data showing the takeover's hidden flow of capital, revealing paths that wind through offshore accounts like veins of a living organism. Each revelation draws the room deeper into silence, and Marcus feels the gravity of what they've uncovered pressing against his ribs. The regulators warn that if the acquisition continues at this pace, the firm behind it will control enough leverage to bend entire markets without resistance. He realizes they aren't just presenting evidence, they're signaling a quiet plea for help. Returning to the research floor, Marcus feels an eerie calm settle over the team, as if everyone senses the storm tightening around them. Elena studies a new data feed, her expression shifting from focus to alarm, as she discovers a sequence of trades so precise it resembles a coded message. Tom enlarges the pattern, revealing a repeating formation that pulses like a signal sent through the market itself. Marcus leans closer, his breath catching when he recognizes the structure. They're not looking at random trades. They're looking at a roadmap. Someone is guiding the takeover step by step, leaving marks only those paying close attention could ever see. He realizes the firm behind this isn't acting alone. It's following instructions from a hidden architect with a plan far bigger than a simple acquisition. They move to the strategy room again, but this time the air feels heavier, as if the walls themselves know what they're about to uncover. Marcus watches the sequence unfold. Across the holographic table, each step lighting up with a precision that borders on impossible. Elena traces the pattern until it forms a shape unmistakable in its intent. Consolidation zones mapped across global markets, converging into a single point of control. Tom shakes his head in disbelief, whispering that only someone with access to classified financial forecasts could design a plan with this kind of foresight. Marcus feels the truth take hold. This empire isn't rising overnight by accident. It's rising because someone engineered time itself to bend in their favor, and they are only witnessing the midpoint of that design. As the evening settles, Marcus steps onto the balcony outside the strategy room, letting the cold wind hit his face while the city roars beneath him. The weight of the discovery presses hard, not because the takeover is dangerous, but because it's intentional on a scale no one is prepared to face. Elena joins him, her voice low as she admits she's traced a part of the pattern before, months ago, when she believed it was only a rumor. Tom approaches with a final report confirming their worst suspicion. The architect behind the takeover has predicted every market reaction so far, as though the world is following a script no one else can read. Marcus feels the city lights blur for a moment, the truth settling in his chest like stone. They aren't fighting a deal. They're fighting destiny crafted by human hands. Morning breaks with a sharp, metallic clarity, the kind that makes the skyline look like a blade pressed against the horizon. Marcus walks into the office feeling the pressure of time closing in, every step echoing the sense that the game has shifted into its most dangerous stage. Reports flood in from Europe, funds freezing, liquidity thinning, spreads widening like fractures in a wall. Elena meets him near the glass railing, overlooking the trading floor, her expression tight, holding a file that looks heavier than anything she carried before. Tom arrives seconds later with eyes wide, saying the architect's next move has already begun. Marcus feels the walls tighten around them, the truth settling like a storm they can't outrun. The empire is no longer rising. It's consolidating, swallowing connections with frightening precision, and only a small window remains before it locks into place forever. The war room fills with tension as they spread fresh reports across the table, graphs rising like jagged mountains, revealing the pace of the takeover, accelerating beyond anything they modeled. Marcus studies the trajectories, noticing how each move strikes at structural weaknesses that only insiders should know. Elena explains that the architect isn't just predicting reactions, they're steering them, exploiting global vulnerabilities with silent precision. Tom shows cross-reference data proving the firm's influence now reaches into energy, commodities, and sovereign debt. Marcus realizes the takeover has shifted from aggressive to inevitable. The fear in the room is palpable, but beneath it lies something deeper. The sense that exposure will come at a cost none of them can afford. As they dissect the data further, Tom uncovers a buried trail. A hidden transfer concealed inside dozens of legitimate transactions, threaded so subtly it almost disappears. Elena leans in, her breath hitching as she realizes the destination. A private equity shell that shouldn't exist anymore, dissolved years ago after a scandal that vanished from the news overnight. Marcus feels the edges of the story sharpening as they trace the transfer's origin, revealing a shadow network that ties directly to the architect's earliest moves. The pattern is undeniable now. The takeover didn't begin last night or last week. It was seeded years ago, planted in silence and nurtured through cycles of collapse and recovery. Marcus feels a quiet dread settle in his chest. They are digging up something someone meant to stay buried. They retreat to the private conference chamber, a room built for silence and secrecy, where even the air feels dense enough to keep conversations from escaping. Marcus lays out everything they've uncovered, each piece fitting together with the precision of a machine, built to hide truth behind layers of complexity. Elena brings up archived documents that survived the scandal tied to the dissolved shell, revealing names connected to political influence, regulatory loopholes, and financial immunity. Tom overlays new data, proving the architect's fingerprints are scattered across crises from years past. Marcus senses they are standing at the edge of a revelation capable of shaking the foundations of entire markets. The empire wasn't created overnight. It was meticulously assembled in the shadows, waiting for the moment the world's guard was down. By late evening, the sky outside burns a deep orange-red, casting long shadows across the glass walls as Marcus stares at the final piece of the puzzle. A signature buried in an old acquisition file, matching the architect's movements perfectly. Elena's voice softens as she explains that the person behind the empire isn't just powerful. They're protected by a network of alliances that span governments and corporations. Tom hands Marcus a final summary, confirming the architect predicted every regulatory delay, every liquidity shift, and every political distraction that helped shield their rise. Marcus absorbs the weight of the truth. They aren't up against a firm or a strategist. They're up against someone who designed an empire from the future backward. And the final phase of their plan begins tonight. Night settles over the city like a heavy curtain, and Marcus feels the shift as soon as he returns to the firm. The kind of stillness that only appears before irreversible moves. The air hums with low tension, every monitor casting a faint glow that feels more like anticipation than light. Elena waits for him near the upper-level glass walkway, her expression unreadable, holding an encrypted report she decrypted only minutes earlier. Tom joins them with a pale look, saying the architect's empire has crossed a threshold. Control has shifted from aggressive acquisition to structural dominance. Marcus senses the ground beneath him tilt, the realization forming that the architect no longer needs secrecy. The market is already bending to their design. He feels pressure building behind his ribs as he understands the magnitude of what they're facing. An empire not rising in the shadows anymore, but standing tall in plain view, daring anyone to challenge it. In the secure analytics chamber, they gather around a massive display showing the architect's influence spreading across global sectors like ink through water. Marcus watches entire industries bend toward a single center point, each connection reinforcing the next, creating a lattice of power nearly impossible to break. Elena identifies a pattern in the architect's moves, an approach that avoids resistance by striking at moments when markets are most distracted. Tom overlays real-time feeds, revealing the pace accelerating even now. Marcus feels the walls closing in. They are tracking an empire that thinks in decades, not days, and every choice it made was designed to appear inevitable. For the first time, he wonders if they're too late to change anything at all, or if they've been following a trail left there to pull them deeper into the architect's reach. They move into the deeper archives, a part of the building used so rarely that dust still clings to the edges of old security locks. Marcus feels a chill as Elena pulls up records predating the shell company's collapse, a timeline revealing a series of calculated moves disguised as market coincidences. Tom uncovers one final link: the architect's earliest maneuver hidden inside a minor merger that went unnoticed years ago. As Marcus studies the connection, he understands the truth with sudden clarity. The architect didn't build an empire overnight. They built a world shaped to receive every crisis, every rebound, every regulatory shift. Aligned like stones in a path the architect prepared long ago. His breathing slows as he realizes they're standing inside the blueprint of a future already planned. Back in the strategy suite, the atmosphere feels heavier than before, as though the building itself understands the significance of what they've uncovered. Marcus stands at the head of the glass table while Elena maps out the final phase of the architect's plan. A maneuver designed to trigger a synchronized shift across global markets, forcing institutions to align under the emerging empire or collapse outright. Tom highlights fail-safes the architect planted years earlier, each one shielding the empire from any meaningful oversight. Marcus feels the weight of their discovery settle across the room like a storm cloud. They are confronting a force that anticipated every possible counterstrike, leaving no weak points and no vulnerability large enough to exploit. He wonders if shining light on the truth will matter when the structure is already too big to fail. As night deepens, Marcus walks out onto the rooftop terrace, the cold wind carrying the distant pulse of the city's restless heartbeat. The skyline burns with the glow of a world on the edge of transformation, each tower reflecting the quiet rise of the empire they've spent days unraveling. Elena steps beside him, admitting she fears the architect anticipated even their investigation. Tom arrives moments later with a final projection showing the last step of the takeover scheduled to trigger before dawn. Marcus studies the city lights as the realization hits him. The architect didn't just build an empire. They built inevitability, and unless they act now, the world will wake up tomorrow under a power built from silence, precision, and a vision no one else understood until too late. Before dawn, the city glows with a faint electric haze, the kind that makes every building feel alive and watching. Marcus steps into the command hub they improvised overnight, feeling the strain of sleepless hours tight across his mind. Elena stands beside a digital wall filled with market feeds, pulsing in erratic waves, and Tom works silently at a terminal, jaw clenched, eyes red. The architect's final phase is already moving, liquidity draining in coordinated patterns across continents, pressure building like a global heartbeat on the edge of rupture. Marcus senses the urgency rising in his chest. They no longer have the luxury of analysis. Elena warns that once the final trigger hits, the empire will harden into a structure impossible to disrupt. Tom says there is one narrow opening left, a single point of vulnerability buried deep in the architect's blueprint. Marcus knows this is their last chance. If they miss it, the world will bend to a power no one can stop. In the secure data vault, the hum of servers surrounds them like a mechanical heartbeat, steady and relentless. Marcus watches Elena decrypt the architect's oldest files, each line of code revealing traces of intent hidden beneath years of market noise. Tom identifies a structural flaw, a misalignment tucked inside an older acquisition model, something the architect likely overlooked because it was built before their empire took shape. Marcus's pulse quickens as he realizes the flaw isn't just a mistake, it's a pressure point that could destabilize the entire network if hit precisely. But the window to exploit it is rapidly shrinking. Elena warns that once the markets cross a certain threshold, the flaw will seal itself behind irreversible consolidation. Marcus feels the weight of the moment settle on him. This is the thread that could unravel everything, if they're bold enough to pull it. They move to the tactical floor, overlooking the city, where real-time feeds show markets trembling like structures under stress. Marcus stands at the center, watching as the Empire's reach squeezes through global systems, shifting capital with cold intention. Elena outlines their counterstrike, a coordinated release of information targeting the flaw, forcing institutions to react before the architect's plan locks in. Tom prepares the data package, his hands shaking as he aligns timestamps to the split-second window they need. Marcus feels tension coil inside him. This move will either fracture the Empire or trigger its defenses, tightening its grasp even further. He breathes slowly, steadying himself, recognizing this is no longer about finance. It's a battle between design and disruption, a fight for the future before it calcifies. The countdown begins, each second echoing like the tick of a clock, about to split the world in two. Marcus watches Tom initiate the release, sending the information cascade through networks designed to react faster than human thought. Elena tracks the ripple effect as institutional algorithms pick up the anomaly, triggering defensive shifts, liquidity redirects, and emergency protocols across multiple markets. The flaw reacts like a wound reopening, destabilizing the Empire's core structure. But the architect responds instantly, countermeasures erupting in real time, flooding the system with false signals meant to drown them out. Marcus feels the pressure mount as the outcome teeters on a razor's edge. Every move they made is now colliding with the architect's design, and only one pattern will survive. The shock hits like a silent explosion. Markets jolt, institutions scramble, and for a brief moment, the entire financial world feels suspended between collapse and liberation. Marcus stares at the primary display as the Empire's structure begins to fracture, slowly at first, then accelerating as the flaw spreads through its interconnected web. Elena confirms that the architect's stabilizers are failing one by one. Tom lets out a shaky breath, disbelief etched across his face. Marcus feels a surge of resolve as he realizes they've done more than delay the Empire. They've exposed it. The world now sees the design behind the curtain, the mechanics of a power built on deception and precision. But he also senses something darker. The architect will not disappear quietly. The next move will come fast, and it will be ruthless. The city wakes in a haze of confusion, headlines flashing warnings across every screen as the Empire buckles under the pressure they unleashed. Marcus stands at the upper balcony overlooking the trading floor, feeling the raw pulse of a market fighting to stabilize itself. Elena joins him, her voice steady but low as she reports that regulators worldwide are demanding answers, scrambling to understand how one hidden force nearly reshaped the global system overnight. Tom arrives with updates showing the architect's networks collapsing in scattered fragments, each one failing faster than the last. Marcus watches the floor erupt in frantic motion as traders struggle to adjust to a world suddenly free from unseen manipulation. Yet beneath the relief lies the unmistakable sense that the architect has not been defeated, only cornered. Marcus steels himself knowing the final confrontation is approaching, and it will not be subtle. Inside the emergency strategy chamber, the atmosphere is charged with an intensity stronger than fear. Anticipation. Marcus studies the last remaining data trail left by the architect, a line so thin it barely exists, yet clear enough to trace if they move quickly. Elena identifies a pattern hidden within the chaos, a final attempt by the architect to preserve a fragment of power before the system fully exposes them. Tom reveals a real-time signal coming from an offshore communications hub, one tied directly to the architect's original shell. Marcus feels the moment crystallize. They know where the architect will strike next, and if they intercept it, everything ends here. The team shares a quiet look, each understanding they have reached the final step, the point of no return. The decision is made. They move to the upper command floor, where a direct link to global regulatory networks waits like an open gate. Marcus stands at the console, feeling a strange calm settle over him as Elena aligns the data package they prepared overnight. Proof of the architect's hidden operations, the blueprint of a manufactured empire, and the flaw that made its exposure possible. Tom synchronizes the final transmission channels, ensuring every major financial authority receives the evidence simultaneously. Marcus breathes deeply as the countdown begins, the seconds ticking like a heartbeat echoing across the room. When the moment arrives, he pushes the command forward. The truth leaves the building in a single pulse, racing across the world, unstoppable. And for the first time since the beginning, the architect's power cracks under the weight of undeniable light. The response is immediate. Markets surge, stabilize, and shift as institutions around the world react to the truth, flooding their systems. Marcus watches as regulatory agencies issue emergency orders, freezing accounts tied to the architect's network and launching investigations on a global scale. Elena confirms the architect's last communication channel has gone silent, severed under the weight of scrutiny. Tom reports that the Empire's shell companies are collapsing rapidly, their assets frozen, their influence dissolving like smoke. Marcus feels relief wash over him, not triumphant but heavy, as though the cost of this victory will echo for years. He looks at his team, knowing they've changed the course of history, even if the world never learns their names. As night falls, the three of them stand on the rooftop terrace once again, the city glowing below like a living organism finally released from a vice. Marcus lets the cold wind wrap around him as he reflects on everything that unfolded: the rise, the deception, the empire engineered to rule the financial world from the shadows. Elena steps closer, telling him the final reports show stability, returning across regions once on the brink of fracture. Tom adds that the architect's identity remains unknown, buried too deep in layers of silence to trace. Marcus accepts it. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only stopped. He looks at the skyline one more time, feeling the quiet pulse of a world that has been given another chance. And as the night expands around them, he understands that victory doesn't always look like celebration. Sometimes it looks like survival.